everyone. It's 22nd of September 2024, and we are going to look at an alternative to Resincrete. It's packaged almost identically, and it has the same mix ratio. So before that, let's finish our second box. I start with a thin coat around the bottom because this box is a stacking box set. I want to protect the bottom, but I don't include that little pedestal part that sits inside the box underneath it. My little picture there was put on with Liquitex medium. You can use Mod Podge. I don't like Mod Podge. You're going to hear me say that a million times, but I don't. And so Liquitex is odor free. It's fine for gluing something down as well as top coating. And I top coated that little sticker of a lady with some writing and so forth in the background twice. The first time I did it, I went around the edges so that I would get a darker edge slightly. And you can barely see it now because the wax is darkening my whole piece. But my point is, the only part that I top coated with Liquitex was that lady, so that I would have good adhesion before I put wax down. I didn't want to knock my little picture off. And so I went all the way around the rim. This wax appears to take off chrome marker pen. I don't know if it's the particular brand that I bought or if it's a consistent problem, but I didn't really care because it's going to have another box sitting on it anyway. So then I set it aside to dry for 30 minutes. Now let's move on to the casting compound that you saw in the opening shot with the almost identical label, although it does not have a back label with instructions. Enough said about that. 200 grams of this other no-name casting powder and 60 grams of water. I pretty much ruined this paintbrush, and so it's now my preferred mixing tool. And it gets off to a little bit of a slow start because I'm trying to get the water down to the very bottom of the cup, and then it speeds up really nicely. And at some point I switch to a spatula so I can scrape the sides down. I probably didn't do a good enough job of mixing because there were a couple of lumps, but that's totally my fault. It's not this compound's fault. It mixes up exactly like Resincrete. So the consistency you'll get is like whole milk or very thin cream, like half and half or what have you. And it poured out as expected. For the round coaster, we're going to add a little bit of alcohol ink. I think I added 5 drops, and I thought, what the heck, let's try a marbling. So I poured that in, and again, it's not thickening quite yet. This whole pour the water, mix, pour the square, add alcohol ink, pour the round, took about 6.5 minutes. Once I had popped the bubbles and hit the molds a little bit, I stopped the timer, 6 minutes, 36 seconds. I restarted it and I over poured, so I made a fatal, flawed attempt to scoop some out, but then decided I was ruining the swirl, so I just left it. Once I was done with all that, I reset the timer and I ended it at 36 minutes and some change we'll see in the next clip. I did have overpour, so I poured those chain link sort of domed rectangles, and I also poured a dog tag shaped overpour mold. Let's check the timer and see how long, and it is 37:32 before I demolded. I could feel on the bottom of the square coaster that it was still warm, as well as the round coaster. Nevertheless, everything came out very easily, as you would expect with Resincrete. So that's a favorable comparison. And the mold had no residue left. And the same was true for every mold we demolded. I can't do a strength comparison for you, but it appears in every other way that this no name generic casting compound compares favorably. The mixing was the same, and the consistency once mixed was the same. It took color the same as Resincrete, demolding same time and same clean demold. And the only faults there were my own for an overpour. The overpour was very thin and flaked off very easily. There were no bubbles on either one, and I think I show the side of the round coaster at some point, and you can see that it is straight-sided, and the only thing I had to do was just take a few pieces of overpour off. Now, to the most important information, price. Resincrete works out to about 2 cents per gram if you're paying $20 per bag, not in the kit, but just the bag alone. The generic works out to less than 1 cent per gram. I actually had to round up because it was just under 1 cent per gram. The comparison of 3 casting compound products since, I don't know, the middle of August is this. For me personally, my experience, my budget, and truthfully, my frustration tolerance level. We tested head-to-head Resincrete and Magic Pour. And Magic Pour, while it is a little bit less expensive, but you get a generous amount, you get a scoop, and you get this good, sturdy, reusable container. It does not mix up well, in my opinion. It seizes up when you try and add acrylic paint directly. I would put the acrylic paint in the water and then add, so just like a baker, wet into wet, dry into dry, wet into dry at the, when you're ready to actually start the mix for molding. Resincrete, compared to my experience with Magic Pour, is a dream. Now, onto this other casting compound, very similarly packaged from a company I do not promote. It was everything that I expected out of Resincrete. So my conclusion, at least in this part of the video, is that budget-wise, I would go with the casting compound in the silver and blue package from a company I don't promote. If I want to be rock solid sure I'm going to get the best results, let's say I'm making a gift or I'm making something for sale, then I would choose Resincrete and pay the extra money. 2 weeks ago, we did a head-to-head comparison with Resincrete and Magic Pour to pour picture frames, and the results were disastrous. And instead of finishing a picture frame I had in reserve, I decided that I would pour the little alpaca instead. And I'm sorry to say that the marker I used to do outlining on him has bled. That is the marker's fault, not the compound's fault. The last experiment we're going to do for the waxing part of this ongoing series of treatments is a white top coat wax. This happens to be by Jolie, and this wax is intended to go over a sealed surface, mostly things like chalk paint or when you're trying to pickle or lime something, that sort of white streaky effect. And honestly, that's not what we're going to do. We're going over raw casting compound that's cured now for at least a week, maybe as much as 2 weeks. Yeah, as much as 2 weeks now that I think about it. And I'm putting on a little bit heavier coat. I have a makeup sponge again, and I am applying it generously. Well, I'm applying it more generously than I did with the other wax treatments that we've done. And I can say that this is a very soft cream wax, but once you've got it on your surface, if you go back over a spot that you have maybe overloaded your sponge a little bit and it leaves just a blob, if you don't get to it right away, it's going to start setting and it will create what appears to be a cloud effect. I don't know if you're going to be able to see it on camera, but my intention is to let this cure for at least 24 hours, and then I'm going to reapply it again to see if I can get that sort of white in wood grain or white alteration of the color that's already there. If it's successful, I would say that it's a fair technique to try if you have a color that you don't like. I love blue, you guys should know that by now, but I don't like that top color very much. I don't drift into the aquas, teals, and that sort of thing very often. I like a clearer, purer blue or a dusty blue. This little box's color appears to be a lavender and a tealish blue. It's not. In real life, that lavender color is actually blue. Thanks for joining me. I've had some competing number one priorities this last week, and I had to forego last week's episode. I hope you forgive me. I hope you learned something. Thanks so much for joining me. See you soon.